A. Abbott. I belong to the Bristol Fiction Writers. I write corporate thrillers, and this is a short crime story which I'll be publishing in a free ebook for my newsletter subscribers, and it's called The Cuckoo and the Phoenix. He'd always loved to go home. The night before the funeral, he slept in his old bed. Crisp sheets smelling of Daz, always made up for him in the little bedroom. Old Eagle annuals, temptingly shiny on the tall bookshelves. The familiar rustle of oak trees at the window. Although his father had renounced smoking and spent the last year of his life close to an oxygen cylinder, the house still smelt of the sweet pipe tobacco the old man had favoured. His own property somehow reeked faintly of drains and stale curry. The dwelling of a man living alone and working long hours. His parents had been the one constant in his life. In London, jobs, friends, relationships, even flats, came and went. Landlords sold up, companies were taken over, friends moved away. There were a surprising number of people at the funeral, 100 at least. Beneath the bald spots and wrinkles, he recognised several old school friends, now middle-aged. Johnny, who went into the police force. Terry, who worked on the buses. Amanda. Who knew what Amanda did? Once, he would have cared a great deal, but no longer. The years had not been kind to them. Looking at their faces, he realised they thought the same of him. Ruefully, he fingered his thinning hair. They invited him for a drink afterwards at the Hare on the Hill. It had been the Mason's Arms, rough as a pit bull in his youth. Now it was everything he thought a pub should be. Light, wooden floored, smoke-free, serving well-kept beer. Prices are on the high side, mind, Terry warned. They're worse in London, he said, almost enjoying Terry's scandalised expression. Will you move back now? Amanda asked. The house will be yours, I suppose. He noticed a hint of desperation in her eyes as she downed her dry white wine. It was her third within the hour. No, there's no going back, he said, a remark that covered all the bases, he thought. He added, that house is ugly, like a cuckoo in the nest. They wouldn't get permission to build it now. It was a brown and white 60s monstrosity put up cheaply on a bomb site, dwarfed by its grand Georgian neighbours. A good address, though, in fact better than it was in the old days. Young professionals had realised you could walk to the city centre in 10 minutes. Now, the street was home to doctors, lawyers and accountants. A teacher like his father could never afford it. The house didn't sell. Every fortnight he spent a weekend there, tending the garden. Lawns were mown, shrubs trimmed, weeds composted. Inside the house, he flicked a duster around occasionally, but it stayed remarkably clean now nobody lived there. When he slept, exhausted, in his old bed, he felt his father watching him approvingly. He painted the front door to give the property curb appeal, to leap up and grab the hearts of buyers. He took to visiting the Hare on Sunday evenings. Terry and Johnny, maybe both, usually wandered in and shared reminiscences over a pint. School days, eh? Best days of your life, Terry said. He was silent. He remembered his youth in Bristol as a time of boredom, frustration, injustice. Caned by the headmaster for misdeeds that were not his. Sacked from the Jolly Boy pub for fiddling the till. He knew he'd never over or undercharged on purpose, definitely hadn't stolen money. He suspected Amanda was the real culprit. Of course, he'd no more have landed Amanda in trouble than cut off his right arm. Did you see the fire in the church hall 2 weeks ago? Johnny asked, changing the subject. You'd have been here then. It was a Saturday night. No? Shame. We're looking for witnesses. Not often we get cases of arson round here now. I don't remember any for decades. There was quite a spate of it when we were young, before you moved to London. He looked into Johnny's eyes, sensing an agenda. There was nothing to see. Johnny was far too professional for that. Better be off now. Up early tomorrow to go back to work. He drained his pint. He took the milk train to London and fell asleep. His dreams were usually pleasant. This time, there was lighter fuel, paper, matches, the school, old Mr. Barney's classroom and the headmaster's study. Delight as the flames took, staring at them entranced from their cubbyhole in the shrubs by the playground, holding Amanda's hand at last. Horns, blue light, voices, splashes. He awoke, ashamed, but chuckling to himself in spite of that. He had done more than hold Amanda's hand. They had kissed for the first time. Then, eyes sparkling, she had encouraged him to go further. He was oblivious to the busy firemen just feet away, and they to him. He was in love. He drifted back to sleep, thinking of the wild look in Amanda's eyes, that look that always made him go weak at the knees. The dream was darker now. It was the Jolly Boy pub, silent and empty. Amanda had said so, and he thought so too, until the fire took hold and they heard the screams. At once, the scene flicked to the local newspaper. Headlines mentioned a tramp in the basement. He woke with a start. That never happened, he thought. Tramp. That was a word you didn't hear anymore. There were travellers who had lorries. There were the homeless, sitting in the doorways wrapped in blankets, asking for spare change. When he first came to London, he had been surprised by the beggars in the streets of the richest city and one of the richest countries in the world. Tramps never begged. His father had pointed one out once as they drove through the countryside. I've seen him every year, his father said. He works on the farms and moves on. He's been doing it since the war. Why should the war have turned a man into a tramp? He had wondered. We won it, didn't we? Every week he bought comics reliving highlights of the war, brave Tommies triumphing over stupid Jerrys. Sometimes, for a change, we outsmarted the cunning Nips. He couldn't imagine the tramp, young, lantern-jawed and brave, stepping into his comic strip and fighting for the Allies. The man was a collection of wrinkles and long whiskers, battered hat, torn clothes, walking through the hedgerows. Tramp, tramp, tramp. He tipped his hat as the car went by. A car was no longer the badge of affluence it had once been. Everyone in Bristol seemed to have one. Even the students who had a purpose-built colony nearby, new flats with underground parking. Even Amanda, who turned up in an old banger at the Hare one Sunday evening and had to be persuaded to leave it there overnight. You've drunk a bottle of wine, he said. I'll have to stay with you then, she told him. He tried not to recoil. That wild look was upon her again, except now he saw it for what it was, a kind of madness. That would have been enough to deter him, but there was more. The grey roots of her bleach blonde hair, her face a mass of smoker's wrinkles, her once lithe body run to fat. She had changed, and he had too. He had escaped his childhood, risen like a phoenix from its ashes. Terry broke the awkward silence, offering to run her back. Johnny raised an eyebrow, but they knew Terry had nursed a single pint all night. He was on an early shift the next morning. After a couple of months, he knocked £20,000 off the price. Miracle of miracles, a buyer emerged. Although he had exchanged contracts now, and he could have let the weeds grow, he returned one more time to do the garden. It would be his last farewell to his father, to his roots. All week, the weather in London had been hot and humid. Arriving in Bristol, he knew a storm was about to break. Dark clouds bore down on the city. He quickly took out the lawnmower, the spades and the shears, and set to work. When the first heavy drops fell, he had to rush to put the tools in the shed. Then the electrical storm began. The air around him trembled. Lightning crackled, with thunder following just a second or so later. That meant the lightning was close. There were massive trees in the garden, an old oak, an outsized holly bush, a sycamore that dwarfed the house, all planted or self-seeded in the days of Queen Victoria. Electricity could strike them at any moment. He must stay inside the shed, breathing in the scent of pipe tobacco that still clung to the tiny wooden structure. Thunder filled his ears, deadening him. The sound of a cross god shouting, of his father chiding him for selling and moving away. He watched with fascination as lightning flashed across the roof of the ugly Scott house, not once, but twice, 3 times. The storm moved on, taking with it the rain clouds that could have saved the building. Flames began to take hold. Then, as he heard an enormous bang, louder than the thunder, he remembered the oxygen cylinder in the living room. There was no saving the Cuckoo now. He stared at the fire, grinning, hypnotised, even when his landscape was filled with sirens and blue lights, and Johnny was nudging his elbow. That was the Cuckoo and the Phoenix.